Hey witches, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Barbie and thank you guys so much for joining me today. In today's video, I am going to be discussing which gem show is better to attend, Denver versus Tucson. I've been getting a lot of questions on which show should I attend, Tucson in the spring or Denver in the fall. There is also a Tucson show in the fall as well. Honestly, before we even get into this video, if you can afford to go to both, go to both. They are two completely different shows and they're must-sees for any crystal lover, any crystal collector, any crystal business, any crystal anything. They're so amazing to go to. So before I even tell you the pros and cons of either, for sure try to go to both if you can. A lot of the Tucson vendors in the spring go to the Denver show in the fall. But let's get into the pros and cons of each, help you decide which one to go to. Let's first talk about time of year. So the Tucson show happens in the spring. For 2023, it's going to be happening January 26th through February 12th. Some shows start as early as January 15th. I will link the Tucson one-on-one show schedule so you can check out which shows actually start when. It's very confusing if you just look at the general show dates, as they don't encompass every single show that happens in Tucson. And the Denver show starts in the fall. It goes from September 8th to September 17th of 2023. So if for some reason you have trips planned, work trips planned, big dates coming up, and one of the two of those dates don't work for you, then definitely go to the date that does work for you, because it's definitely worth checking out one of the shows. Both shows are absolutely amazing, and Denver is quickly growing and becoming a massive gem show just like Tucson is. It's not quite there yet, but very much worth going and checking out. And this is just my opinion, but I would recommend going at least 4 days, whether that's 2 days of travel and 2 days full on the ground shopping. If you're coming in early from another state and leaving late in the day, you can get 4 days out of that, especially if you're a shop owner. If you're just a collector, you could probably still easily spend 3 full days going there and still not seeing everything. And that goes for both Tucson and Denver. I did Denver in just 3 days and I felt like I did not have nearly enough time. 4 days in Tucson was a pretty good amount of time. I think I was able to see everything I wanted to see with a little bit extra time. Now, the Tucson show is massive. It takes over the entire city. Unlike the Denver show in the fall, the Tucson show has been going on for years and years and is very established in the city of Tucson in Arizona. So that one is definitely one of the largest gem shows in the world, if not the largest show. I'd definitely recommend a rental car so you can pop from show to show without having to pay for an Uber each time. So Tucson features over 29 different showcases, and each of those showcases can have anywhere from 10 to 200 plus vendors. So that, if you can imagine how big that is, it is absolutely massive. There's no way you can see it all unless you stay the entire show. One show, like the Pueblo show, could take you an entire day just to be able to see everything. And that's just one show. So Denver has 2 main shows. There's one actually near the airport that I wasn't able to check out this time that has quite a few of wholesale vendors there. Some of my wholesale vendors show there. So lots of interesting stuff to check out at that show. And then there's the other show, which is the main show at the Coliseum. The Coliseum is where the big show is. There's both indoor and outdoor shows. There's 2 massive shows inside and massive shows outside as well. And again, 3 days was not enough just to see that. So it is a very large show. So in my opinion, if you have less travel time and a smaller budget, I personally would recommend Denver, and I'm going to talk about why. And if you have a bigger budget and more time on your hands to actually spend at the show, meaning 4 or more plus days, I recommend Tucson. So let's get into why. In terms of ease of getting to the shows, I definitely think that Tucson is much easier to navigate, and here are a few reasons why. So the Tucson airport is a lot smaller, and it's only only 15 minutes from all of the shows, if not closer, and it's just more convenient to get your rental car, get your baggage, especially if you're an out-of-town traveler. It's just so much easier to navigate around. Because this show has been going on for so long, they've established some efficiencies that I don't think Denver quite has established yet. The Denver airport, on the other hand, in my opinion, is extremely difficult, hard to navigate, a pain in the for walking around. It took me from getting off my flight to walking to baggage claim about 15 to 20 minutes, and then you have to get on a bus to get your rental car. The whole ordeal probably took me 45 minutes to an hour just to get out of the airport and get my car, then to head to the show. That's another half an hour drive. So you just end up wasting some time in terms of just coordinating and getting yourself together to get to the shows. So you definitely lose time on the Denver end just getting to the shows versus the Tucson end. Another thing that makes Tucson way easier to navigate, even though it's a massive show that takes over the entire city, is there's actually an app that was developed for the Tucson Gem Show. Now, I had recently checked to see if this app still existed, and it didn't. So I'm hoping that they revamp it. I think it still exists on Android, but not in the Apple Store. So that app basically shows you where every single show is, the addresses, who's gonna be there, how far of a drive it is from your current location. Is just super convenient. Whereas the Denver show just gives you an address and some very high level information. It's a little bit hard to kind of figure out where the other shows are outside of the main show. I didn't even figure out that the show at the airport was happening until the end, and I didn't have time to attend it at that point. So it's just a little bit less convenient to figure out where everything is in Denver, though I think that they will make improvements on that later. So another convenience about the Tucson show versus the Denver show is each of the Tucson shows have their separate parking, which makes sense because it's all over the city, whereas the Denver show at the Coliseum has two large parking lots. The first one that is right next to the show, it tends to fill up, so most people park across the street, which it's free, unlike a lot of the Tucson shows you have to pay for parking, which is super convenient. However, the hike from the show to your car and from your car to the show every morning can be a little bit brutal, especially if you're hauling a lot of crystals. It can be a 15-20 minute walk depending on where you are in the show and how far away you park. Whereas the Tucson show, a lot of them offer the designated parking right at the show, so you're literally 5 feet from walking in the entrance of the show or very close to the entrance of the show. And a lot of them offer pickup, so you can go and pick up your crystals so you don't have to haul them back to your car. So in terms of ease of the shows, I definitely think Tucson has a lot more efficiencies in the ease of navigating the show, but on the contrary, it is so large that you just need more time. Whereas the Denver show, it's a little bit cumbersome coming from the airport and walking from your car to the show every morning, but since the show is more condensed, you can definitely see more at the Denver show than the Tucson show. So that's why I'm recommending, if you have more time, go to the Tucson show, and if you have less time on your hands, go to the Denver show. So let's also talk about expense, because there's a pretty drastic difference, at least in my opinion and experience, between traveling to the Tucson show versus traveling to the Denver show. And I am in the Midwest. I'm pretty much dead in the middle of the country. So it's just based on my experience flying there, paying for hotels, renting cars, etc. So in my opinion, Denver has much more variety in places to stay, a bigger variety of price points in places to stay. If you're renting a hotel, an Airbnb or VRBO, they just have more variety. I was able to find probably over 150 places within a 5 to 10 mile range of the Denver show, and there was so many amazing places that were spacious, that looked safe, that looked clean, and I can't say the same for Tucson. I'll also say that the Denver price point for accommodations was significantly lower during that time than the Tucson show. And I think this happens for a couple of reasons. I think because Tucson has this show every single year at the same time, everybody raises their prices. All the hotels are expensive in Tucson. All of the Airbnbs, all of the VRBOs, they're all extremely expensive. More than they are any other time time during the year because I looked at that when I went to book. So I think if you are on a little bit of a tighter budget, you'll get a better price for accommodations in Denver because the Denver Gem Show hasn't taken off in a big way like the Tucson show has. Therefore, the prices are much cheaper and more reasonable, where everyone in Tucson hikes their prices up. So you're gonna pay a lot no matter where you stay. So hotel rates in Tucson during the Gem Show are like $200 and up a night. Whereas in Denver, you could get stuff under $200 easily. Really nice places. And I will say, when I was initially doing research in Tucson, a lot of the cheaper places just looked a little sketchy. Like, they looked a little run down, they looked a little unsafe, they didn't look like they were in the greatest parts of Tucson. So to me, it wasn't worth compromising potentially my safety, not staying in a place as a single woman, going to a show by myself, that was a good idea. So I decided to spend a little bit more and stay in a reputable hotel that was very safe. That's another reason why I recommend staying at least 4 days, because you'll get your money's worth. If you end up staying just a day or two, it's really expensive for accommodations in Tucson versus Denver. So if you were to spend $120 a night in Denver, it's worth it if you were to stay at less days. But if you're spending $200+ a night on just accommodations alone in Tucson and only staying for 2 days, you're just not getting your money's worth. You really want to stay longer so you can see more, because if you're flying in late or you have any flight delays and you don't get to the shows till late in the day, they're only open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then they're done. So if you don't spend a lot of time there, it's really not worth the money to go to Tucson, versus if you do have a tighter budget and less time. That's why I recommend Denver versus Tucson. So another thing to note about Tucson is there are a lot of shows at hotels like the Red Lion Inn and a lot of the other hotels locally in downtown Tucson. And you guys, a lot of the vendors coming to the shows take up those rooms. So that's where all of the cheap rooms go. They go to the vendors who are hosting the shows or selling at the gem shows. So when you go to the Red Lion Inn, all of the hotel rooms are crystal shows. So as cool as that is, they take up space for you to stay there. And I don't know, you could probably try to rent a room there. I've never tried so far. A, they could be really booked up. B, their prices are probably jacked up too. And C, do you want to be staying at a place where every single crystal vendor is staying? Because guess what, guys? They're setting up early. They're taking down stuff late. There's people all over. It's loud. It's noisy. So I think those hotels may be an option, but just ask yourself, do you really want to be staying in the middle of all the act? If you do, great, definitely look into those options. Whereas in Denver, that's not so much the case. There's much more accommodations in Denver, so you're not necessarily sleeping right above a supplier or vendor at the show. And then in terms of crystal selection, which show has better gems? Honestly, you guys, it's a complete tie. So many of the Denver vendors show at Tucson in the spring and vice versa. A lot of the same people who are in Denver are in Tucson in the spring. So you're really getting the best of the best. When they come to these shows, they're bringing their newest, their latest, their greatest, their most rare, their best finds. So that's why it's so good to go to these shows, not only to make connections, but to just pick out things firsthand, learn and meet people, learn new minerals. There's just so many learning opportunities at these shows. And that's why I don't think one of these shows is better than the other. I personally was able to make better connections in Denver because it was a little bit of a smaller show and I could actually sit down with some of these suppliers and talk to them one-on-one, ask them questions, ask if we can continue a business relationship outside of the show. Whereas in Tucson, because it's so busy and everyone wants a price check, everybody's asking questions, the vendor's attention is everywhere, it's really hard to establish some of those more true connections. Not impossible by any means. It's just when you want to build a connection with someone, you need to have time. So that's why if you're short on time, it's probably better to do a Denver versus a Tucson, because if you spend even just 15 minutes talking to 10 vendors, I mean, hours go by, and that's hours you don't get to see the rest of the shows. You will 100% find amazing stuff no matter what show you attend. And just in terms of size, they're probably probably is a real chance if you were to stay a little bit longer in Denver that you could actually see all of the suppliers and vendors at the show in 3 to 4 days if you really were focused. I can't say the same for Tucson. In 3 or 4 days, you may not even get through a quarter of the show. That's how big it is. So if you want to see more, I definitely would choose Denver just because all of the vendors are like right next to each other. They're like in a line to each other, and sometimes that's true in Tucson at a specific show, but let's say you go to a different show, sometimes that's not the case and you have to physically get in your car and drive to another show, whereas in Denver you're basically just walking the main show at the Coliseum. The Denver show is much more compressed, so you can see a lot more in less time than the Tucson show, because that's driving to this show, driving to that show, or you can walk to some of the shows depending on where you're staying. Some of the shows are 10 or 15 minutes away from where you could be staying, and sometimes 10 or 15 minutes away from each other. So you're spending a lot of time in the car driving around, hauling crystals back to your car, getting everything loaded in. So it's a lot more tedious in Tucson. So it's nice if you have less time to be able to see more in Denver because it's all conveniently located in one location. So even though the Denver airport is a little bit trickier to navigate, get around, get your rental car, etc., it's still probably the best option if you have a tighter budget and less time. So whereas the Tucson airport is much smaller, walking distance to the rental car place, that's 15 minutes from the show, you can literally be at the show within a half an hour of your plane landing on the ground, which is amazing. I think that ultimately, if you have a smaller budget, less time, Denver is your best route to go. But if you have more time, let's say you have a week of vacation and you have a big budget to be able to spend $250+ on a hotel room every night and get a rental car and pay for the flight down, plus a bigger budget for buying crystals, Tucson is a great place to go. If you can attend both shows, absolutely do, because there are 2 different shows in 2 completely different cities. Some vendors only go to one of the shows, so no matter which show you go to, you're gonna meet new people. You're gonna see some of your old favorites if you can find them. Keep their business cards because they tell you where they are in Tucson and where they are in Denver, and a lot of them have the same booth every single year. They have to commit to that booth immediately after the show is over for next year. So they have that booth secured so you know exactly where they are, exactly where to find them. So I highly recommend, if you can, go to both shows. Once you end your show at Tucson, start saving up for Denver. And once you end your show at Denver, start saving up for Tucson. They happen pretty far apart, so you could have a Tucson or a Denver fund so you can afford to go to both shows, because they are both absolutely excellent shows. I have such an amazing time when I go. It's so spiritual, it's so fun. You meet so many amazing people from all over the world. It's just nothing you've ever experienced before, and as a shop, as a collector, as just someone who loves crystals, it really is like going to Disney World for crystals. That's absolutely what it's like, and it's just the most amazing experience. I look forward to it every single year. So anyways, I hope you guys have found this video helpful. Now, this is just based on my experience, my opinions. You may have different experience and advice down below. Absolutely put it in the comment section so you guys can help each other out. If you guys have been to both shows, let me know what was your favorite. Did you like Denver? Did you like Tucson more? Did you hate one or like one less or more? I don't think you could really hate any of the shows, but let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts and your opinions are on this topic, and what your thoughts or opinions on are for which show you should attend if you've gone, or if you want to go, what are the questions that you have for me. I definitely want to make more Q&As and more information on the gem shows, because when I was researching, there really isn't a lot of information out there on these 2 shows. So if you haven't already, I have a Tucson vlog that I will link up above if you want to go check that out. I also have a Denver vlog that recently went live if you want to go check that out, see what the shows are kind of like, what they look like, what my experience was there. And I also have a Tucson 101 guide on what to bring, how much cash to bring, where to stay, etc. And right after this, I'm also going to be filming a must-see show list for Tucson, because there are over 29 different showcases. I really want to call out my top favorite shows so that it can help you focus if you don't have a lot of time and you do want to go to Tucson. van. So I'm gonna hop over and start filming that video. So stay tuned for that one, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye!